Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the voice behind her in the empty restaurant. "Did you really think you could disappear without a trace?" The sound of expensive leather shoes against the marble floor made her pulse race. She turned slowly, meeting the steel-gray eyes of Anthony Marconi, the most feared man in New York, standing between her and the exit. For 3 months, she had managed to stay hidden. 3 months of looking over her shoulder, changing her routine, sleeping with one eye open. But now he was here, and the look in his eyes wasn't anger. It was something far more dangerous, desperation. "We need to talk, Emily." His voice was steady, controlled, but she caught the tremor underneath. The man who had never shown fear to anyone was afraid of losing her. To follow this intense story until the very end, join our community of storytelling lovers. Our goal is to reach 5,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's dive into this emotional journey. 3 months earlier, Emily Rodriguez had been living her perfectly ordinary life as a waitress at Bella Notte, one of Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurants. At 25, she had worked her way up from busser to head waitress through pure determination and an uncanny ability to remember every detail about the restaurant's most demanding clientele. She loved her job, the fast pace, the adrenaline rush of a busy Friday night, and especially the generous tips that helped her save for culinary school. That Tuesday evening started like any other. The restaurant hummed with its usual sophisticated energy, crystal glasses clinking, quiet conversations in multiple languages, and the subtle sounds of perfectly orchestrated service. Emily moved between tables with practiced grace, her long dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her smile genuine but professional. Everything changed when Anthony Marconi walked through those doors. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the kitchen staff, who had seen every kind of powerful figure walk through those doors, went silent. Emily had heard whispers about him, the youngest Don in New York's history, the man who had consolidated 3 warring families under his control before his 30th birthday. But she had never seen him in person. He was devastating. Tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his face looked like it had been carved by a master sculptor. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, and those incredible grey eyes that seemed to see everything. But it wasn't his physical presence that made her breath catch. It was the way he carried himself, the quiet confidence of a man who knew he owned every room he entered. Anthony's usual table, the corner booth that offered perfect views of both entrances, had been reserved, as always. His security detail had already swept the area, and his bodyguards positioned themselves strategically around the restaurant. Emily's manager, Mr. Castellano, personally escorted Anthony to his table, treating him with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. "Emily," Mr. Castellano appeared at her elbow, his voice tight with nervous energy. "You'll be serving Mr. Marconi tonight. Remember, whatever he wants, however he wants it. No mistakes." Emily nodded, smoothing down her black uniform dress. She had served celebrities, politicians, and business tycoons, but this felt different. As she approached his table with the wine list and menu, she forced herself to breathe normally. "Good evening, Mr. Marconi. Welcome to Bella Notte." Her voice was steady, professional. Anthony looked up from his phone, and Emily felt the full force of his attention like a physical touch. His eyes swept over her face with an intensity that made her stomach flutter, but his expression remained unreadable. "I'll have the Barolo 2015, he said, without looking at the wine list. His voice was deep, with just a hint of gravel that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Excellent choice. Will you be dining alone this evening?" Emily asked, pulling out her notepad. "For now." His gaze lingered on her face. "You're new." "I've been here 2 years, sir." "Perhaps you usually have a different server." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe amusement. "No one's called me sir in a very long time." Emily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I apologize, Mr. Marconi. Would you prefer—" "It's fine." He leaned back against the leather banquette, studying her with those penetrating grey eyes. "What's your name?" "Emily Rodriguez." "Emily." The way he said her name made something warm unfurl in her chest. "I'll let you know when I'm ready to order." As Emily headed to the wine cellar, she could feel his eyes on her. She told herself it was just business, Wealthy, powerful men often showed interest in pretty waitresses. It meant nothing. But when she returned with the wine, the way Anthony watched her pour it with complete focus made her hands tremble slightly. "Tell me about the osso buco," he said, after tasting the wine and nodding his approval. Emily launched into her well-practiced description of the dish, but Anthony wasn't looking at the menu. He was watching her face as she spoke, noting the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the food, how her hands gestured expressively. When she finished, he ordered the osso buco without hesitation. Throughout the evening, Emily found herself making excuses to check on his table. Each time, Anthony would ask her something, about the restaurant, about the chef, about her recommendations. Their conversations were brief but intense, filled with an undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. When Anthony's business associate arrived, a nervous-looking man in an expensive but ill-fitting suit, Emily retreated to give them privacy. But she couldn't help noticing how Anthony's entire demeanor changed. The warmth disappeared, replaced by cold authority. His voice became clipped, dangerous. This was the man people feared, ruthless, calculating, completely in control. But when he looked at her, something in his expression softened. As the evening wound down and Anthony prepared to leave, he asked for the check. Emily brought it over, trying to maintain her professional composure, even as her heart raced. "Thank you for an excellent evening, Emily," he said, placing several $100 bills on the table, far more than necessary. "Thank you, Mr. Marconi. We hope to see you again soon." Anthony stood, adjusting his suit jacket. For a moment he hesitated, as if he wanted to say something more. Instead, he simply nodded and walked away, his security detail falling into formation around him. Emily watched him go, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. She had no way of knowing that this was the moment Anthony Marconi's carefully controlled world began to crack. She had no idea that the most dangerous man in New York had just experienced something he'd never felt before, genuine interest in another person. And she certainly couldn't have predicted that her life was about to change forever. Anthony returned to Bella Notte exactly 1 week later. This time, Emily was ready for the effect of his presence, but it still took her breath away. He requested the same table and specifically requested her as his server. "The usual Barolo?" Emily asked, approaching his table with more confidence than she felt. "Actually," Anthony said, closing the menu without looking at it. "Surprise me. Both with the wine and dinner. I trust your judgment." Emily blinked in surprise. In her experience, powerful men like Anthony Marconi didn't trust anyone's judgment but their own. "Are you sure? Do you have any dietary restrictions or preferences?" "No restrictions. I want to see what you choose for me." It was a test, Emily realized. But of what, she wasn't sure. She selected a robust Chianti Classico and paired it with the chef's signature lamb with rosemary and garlic, a dish that wasn't on the regular menu but showcased the chef's true artistry. When she presented the wine for tasting, Anthony's approving nod felt like a small victory. And when the lamb arrived, perfectly prepared and elegantly plated, she watched his face carefully as he took the first bite. "Exceptional," he said, and Emily felt a flush of pride. "How did you know?" "You appreciate quality, but you're not flashy about it," Emily said, then immediately worried she'd overstepped. "Your suit, your watch, the way you carry yourself, everything is perfect but understated. I thought you might appreciate something sophisticated but not ostentatious." Anthony set down his fork and studied her face. "You're very observant. It's part of being a good server. Reading people, understanding what they really want." "And what do you think I really want, Emily?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Emily felt her cheeks warm as she searched for an appropriate response. "I think you want to be surprised by something genuine," she said finally. "You're used to people telling you what they think you want to hear." For the first time since she'd met him, Anthony smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "You're not wrong." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another man, this one clearly not a business associate. He was younger than Anthony, with similar dark features and the same predatory grace. "Family," Emily realized. "Tony," the newcomer said, sliding into the booth without invitation. "We have a problem." Anthony's expression instantly hardened. "Not here, Marco." "It can't wait." Marco's voice was urgent, and Emily caught fragments of their rapid-fire conversation as she refilled water glasses at nearby tables. Something about a shipment, a betrayal, consequences that needed to be addressed immediately. Anthony's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and Emily saw his jaw clench. "I have to go," he said, standing abruptly. "But sir, you've barely touched your dinner," Emily said, concerned. Anthony paused, looking down at the plate she'd so carefully selected for him. For a moment she saw something vulnerable in his expression: regret, frustration, maybe even longing. "Package it up," he said. "I'll finish it later." As Emily hurried to get a takeout container from the kitchen, she heard Marco talking in rapid Italian. She caught enough to understand that someone had tried to move against Anthony's territory, and his response would be swift and decisive. When she returned with the packaged meal, Anthony was already putting on his coat. He handed her another generous tip and paused. "Emily," he said, his voice lower, more intimate. "Next Tuesday, same time." It wasn't a question. "Of course, Mr. Marconi." "Anthony," he said. "When we're alone, call me Anthony." Emily's breath caught. The use of his first name felt intimate, dangerous. "I'll see you next Tuesday, Anthony." Something dark and possessive flashed in his eyes when she said his name. Then he was gone, leaving Emily with a racing heart and the lingering scent of his expensive cologne. The following Tuesday, Anthony arrived exactly on time, but Emily immediately sensed something was different. He moved with barely controlled tension, and there was a hardness in his eyes that made her stomach clench with worry. "The usual table is ready for you," Emily said, leading him across the restaurant. Anthony followed but didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he stood close to her, closer than appropriate, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Emily," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Some things have changed since last week. People know that I have an interest in this place, in you." Emily's heart stopped. "What does that mean?" "It means you could be in danger, just by association with me." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She had known intellectually that Anthony was dangerous, but the reality of that danger extending to her felt surreal. "I don't understand," she whispered. Anthony's hands clenched at his sides, as if he was fighting the urge to touch her. "My enemies look for weaknesses, Emily. Things they can use against me. And you—" He stopped, jaw working. "I'm a weakness." Anthony's eyes met hers, and Emily saw something that shocked her. Fear, not for himself, but for her. "You could be," he said softly, "if they knew how I feel about you." The admission hung between them, charged with dangerous possibility. Emily's logical mind screamed at her to step back, to end whatever this was before it could begin. But her heart was racing, and when Anthony reached out to gently touch her cheek, she didn't pull away. "I should walk away," Anthony said, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "I should never come back here. It would be safer for you." "But you won't," Emily said, and she knew it was true. "No," Anthony said, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't. God help us both. But I can't." The restaurant around them faded away. There was only Anthony's intense gaze, the warmth of his touch, and the terrifying realization that her carefully ordered life was about to be turned completely upside down. And despite every rational thought in her head, Emily found herself stepping closer to the danger instead of away from it. For the next month, Anthony came to Bella Notte every Tuesday without fail. Each visit intensified the connection between them, building a tension that Emily could feel in every glance, every carefully neutral conversation, every moment when his fingers accidentally brushed hers. Anthony began arriving earlier each week, staying later, finding excuses to extend their interactions. He would ask about her background, her dreams, her thoughts on everything from books to music to her favorite places in the city. Emily found herself opening up to him in ways that surprised her, telling him about her grandmother, who had taught her to cook, her dreams of opening her own restaurant someday, her love of old movies and jazz music. What surprised her most was how carefully Anthony listened. This man who commanded empires and made decisions that affected thousands of people gave her his complete, undivided attention when she spoke about her simple dreams. One rainy Tuesday evening in October, Emily noticed that Anthony seemed more on edge than usual. His security detail was larger, and she caught them speaking in hushed, urgent tones. When she brought Anthony his wine, he was staring out the window at the dark street. "Is everything all right?" Emily asked softly. Anthony's eyes snapped to her face. "It will be. You seem worried." "I'm always worried about something, Emily. It comes with the territory. He paused, studying her face. But lately, I find myself worrying about different things. Before Emily could ask what he meant, the restaurant's front door chimed. Emily glanced over and froze. 3 men in dark coats had entered, and there was something about the way they moved, the way Anthony's security team immediately went on high alert, that made her blood run cold. "Emily," Anthony's voice was deadly calm. "Walk to the kitchen. Now." "What's happening?" "Walk to the kitchen and don't come out until I tell you it's safe." Emily's training as a server warred with every instinct screaming at her to run. The 3 men were moving through the restaurant now, and she could see other diners beginning to sense the tension. "Anthony, go, now." The command in his voice brooked no argument. Emily turned toward the kitchen, but she had only taken 3 steps when one of the men called out, "Anthony Marconi!" The voice carried across the restaurant, causing several diners to gasp. "We need to talk." Emily turned back despite Anthony's order and saw him standing slowly, his movements controlled and deliberate. The transformation was complete. This was no longer the man who asked about her favorite books. This was the Don, cold and lethal. "Vincent," Anthony said, his voice carrying easily across the restaurant, "I didn't realize you were back in town." "Surprise," Vincent replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We have business to discuss." "This isn't the place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the place." Vincent's gaze swept the restaurant and landed on Emily, who stood frozen halfway to the kitchen. His smile widened. "Especially since I see you've developed some new interests." Anthony's entire body went rigid. "Leave her out of this." "Her? The little waitress?" Vincent tilted his head, studying Emily like a predator sizing up prey. "Pretty thing. I can see the appeal." "Vincent." Anthony's voice was soft, but Emily had learned to recognize that particular tone. It was the voice that came right before violence. "Relax, Tony. I'm not here to hurt anyone. Yet." Vincent gestured to his companions, and they fanned out slightly. "I'm here because you've been avoiding my calls. That's rude." Anthony moved then, positioning himself between Vincent and Emily. The protective gesture was subtle but unmistakable. "We'll talk," Anthony said, "but not here. Not in front of civilians." "Civilians?" Vincent laughed. "Is that what we're calling her? Because word on the street is she's become much more important than that." Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. She understood now, with crystal clarity, what Anthony had been trying to tell her about danger. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real, immediate, and terrifying. "You have 5 seconds to walk out of here," Anthony said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "Or what? You'll cause a scene in your girlfriend's workplace?" The word girlfriend hung in the air like a challenge. Emily saw Anthony's hands curl into fists, saw the moment when his legendary control began to crack. 3 seconds. Vincent's smile faded, as he apparently remembered exactly who he was threatening. Around the restaurant, Anthony's security team had moved into position, and Emily realized with a chill that the other diners had no idea how close they were to witnessing something truly terrible. "This isn't over, Tony," Vincent said finally. "You can't protect her forever. Watch me." Vincent looked at Emily one more time, memorizing her face, then jerked his head toward the door. His companions followed as he walked out, but Emily could feel their threat lingering in the air like smoke. Anthony didn't move until the door closed behind them. Then he turned to Emily, and she saw that his hands were shaking slightly. "Are you hurt?" He crossed to her in 3 quick strides, his hands hovering over her arms as if he wanted to touch her, but didn't dare. "I'm fine," Emily managed. "But Anthony, what just happened?" Anthony closed his eyes briefly. "What I was afraid would happen. Vincent Torrino is trying to move against my family. He thinks you're a way to get to me." "Am I?" Anthony's eyes opened, and Emily saw the truth there before he spoke it. "Yes." The simple admission hit Emily like a physical blow. She was a target now, simply because a dangerous man had feelings for her. "I'm sorry," Anthony said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I should have stayed away. I knew this could happen, and I did it anyway." Emily looked at this man, this powerful, feared man who was apologizing to her, who was genuinely afraid for her safety, and made a decision that would change everything. "Don't apologize," she said softly. "I made my choice too." Anthony's breath caught. "Emily, I need to know something," she continued, stepping closer to him. "What you feel for me, is it real?" Anthony's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing along her cheekbones. "It's the most real thing in my life. Then we'll figure this out. Together." For the first time since she'd met him, Emily saw Anthony Marconi look truly vulnerable. This man who feared nothing and no one was terrified of losing her. "It won't be easy," he warned. "My world is dangerous, Emily. People like Vincent will always see you as a way to hurt me." "Then we'll have to make sure they can't," Emily said, with more confidence than she felt. Anthony leaned down until his forehead rested against hers. "I've never wanted to protect anyone the way I want to protect you. And I've never wanted to be brave enough for someone the way I want to be brave enough for you." When Anthony kissed her, soft and desperate and full of promises, Emily tasted both salvation and damnation. She was crossing a line she could never uncross, entering a world she didn't understand. But as Anthony's arms came around her, holding her like she was something precious and fragile, Emily knew she would rather face the darkness with him than live safely without him. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of intensity. Anthony assigned discreet security to Emily without her knowledge, and she only discovered it when she noticed the same man sitting in the coffee shop across from her apartment for 3 days running. When she confronted Anthony about it, his response was unyielding. "I won't negotiate on your safety, Emily. Ever." Their relationship deepened during stolen moments, early morning phone calls, late evening texts, and their Tuesday dinners that had become the highlight of both their weeks. Anthony began to reveal pieces of his past. The father who had groomed him for this life from childhood, the weight of responsibility for hundreds of families who depended on him, the isolation that came with absolute power. Emily, in turn, shared her own struggles. Growing up with parents who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, the scholarship that had gotten her through college, her fierce independence that made accepting help difficult. "I want to give you everything," Anthony told her one evening, as they sat in his private booth, the restaurant empty except for the cleaning crew. "I don't need everything," Emily replied. "I just need you to be honest with me." It was that honesty that made their relationship both beautiful and dangerous. On a cold Thursday evening, Emily's careful world finally shattered completely. She was walking home from work, taking her usual route through the well-lit streets of her neighborhood, when a black sedan pulled up alongside her. Emily's training from Anthony's security briefings kicked in immediately. She turned toward the nearest crowded area, but it was too late. "Emily Rodriguez." The voice came from the car's open window. "Get in." "No," Emily said firmly, continuing to walk toward the bright lights of a 24-hour diner. The car door opened, and Vincent Torrino stepped out. Emily's blood ran cold as she recognized him from that night at the restaurant. "That wasn't really a request," Vincent said pleasantly. Emily reached for her phone to call Anthony, but Vincent's companion was already beside her, gently but firmly removing the device from her hands. "Don't worry," Vincent said as his associate guided Emily toward the car. "We're not going to hurt you, we just want to have a conversation." Emily found herself in the back of the sedan, Vincent beside her, and 2 large men in the front seats. Her mouth went dry with terror, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What do you want?" she asked. "To understand what Anthony Marconi sees in you," Vincent replied, studying her face. "You're pretty enough, but he could have any woman in the city. What makes you special?" "I don't know what you mean." Vincent laughed. "Oh, come now, the great Anthony Marconi doesn't establish a standing reservation at a restaurant every week for just anyone. He doesn't assign security details to protect random waitresses. He certainly doesn't lose his famous composure when someone threatens a person he doesn't care about." Emily's heart sank as she realized how much Vincent knew about Anthony's feelings for her. "Here's what's going to happen," Vincent continued as the car wound through increasingly unfamiliar streets. "You're going to call Anthony and tell him you want to see him, tonight, alone. I won't help you hurt him." "Hurt him?" Vincent looked genuinely surprised. "Emily, I don't want to hurt Anthony. I want to remove him from power so I can take over his territory. Your cooperation will make that much cleaner and easier." The car stopped in front of a warehouse in a part of the city Emily didn't recognize. Vincent's associates helped her out of the car with the same politeness they might show to any dinner guest. Inside the warehouse, Emily saw a simple setup, a chair, a table with her phone on it, and several men positioned around the space. Vincent gestured for her to sit. "Make the call," he said, sliding the phone across the table. "Tell Anthony you need to see him." Tell him you're scared and you need him to come alone. No, Vincent sighed. Emily, I like you, I really do. You've got spirit. But I need you to understand that this isn't a negotiation. One of Vincent's men stepped forward, and Emily saw the gun holstered under his jacket. The threat was subtle but clear. You won't hurt me, Emily said with more confidence than she felt. You need me alive to get to Anthony. True, Vincent agreed, but there are many ways to hurt someone without killing them. Emily stared at the phone, her mind racing. If she called Anthony, she would be leading him into a trap. But if she didn't, Vincent would escalate his threats. Either way, Anthony was in danger because of her. What happens after he comes? Emily asked. That depends on how reasonable he's willing to be. Emily understood that Vincent was giving Anthony a choice: step down voluntarily or be removed permanently. And he was using her as leverage. With trembling fingers, Emily picked up the phone, but instead of calling Anthony, she did something Vincent didn't expect. She called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I've been kidnapped, Emily said quickly before Vincent could react. I'm at a warehouse on... Vincent lunged across the table and grabbed the phone, ending the call. His pleasant demeanor vanished completely. That was very stupid, he said. Emily lifted her chin defiantly. I won't be used as bait to hurt someone I care about. Vincent studied her face for a long moment, and Emily saw a flicker of something that might have been respect. I see what he sees in you, Vincent said finally. You're not just pretty. You're loyal and brave. He paused. Unfortunately, that makes you even more dangerous to me. Before Emily could ask what he meant, she heard the sound of car doors slamming outside the warehouse. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. Vincent cursed under his breath and grabbed a radio. How many? He barked into it. At least 12 vehicles, came the crackling response. They've surrounded the building. Emily's heart leaped. Anthony had found her. How? Vincent demanded. Emily smiled despite her fear. He probably has a tracker on my phone. He's very thorough about protecting people he cares about. A voice, amplified and unmistakably Anthony's, echoed through the warehouse. Vincent, you have 30 seconds to send Emily out unharmed. After that, I stop being reasonable. Vincent looked at Emily, then at his men, clearly calculating his options. 20 seconds! Anthony's voice cut through the air like a blade. Let her go, Emily said quietly. You've lost this round. Vincent's jaw clenched, but he was a practical man. He gestured to his associates. Escort Miss Rodriguez to the door. As Emily stood to leave, Vincent caught her arm gently. This isn't over, he said. As long as you're in Anthony's life, you'll always be a target. Are you prepared for that? Emily met his gaze steadily. Are you prepared for what Anthony will do to anyone who threatens me? Vincent's hand dropped away, and Emily walked toward the warehouse door. When she emerged into the cold night air, the first thing she saw was Anthony running toward her, his face a mask of fury and relief. He caught her in his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Are you hurt? He demanded, his hands moving over her face and arms, checking for injuries. I'm fine, Emily said, though her voice was shaking. Anthony, I'm fine. Anthony pulled back to look at her, and Emily saw that his legendary control had completely shattered. This was a man who had been terrified of losing the most important thing in his world. I thought I'd lost you, he said, his voice rough. You didn't. You found me. Emily, Anthony said, framing her face with his hands, I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that what we have isn't real, isn't everything, and I can't keep you safe if you're not truly mine. Emily's breath caught as she understood what he was asking. Are you sure? She whispered. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. When Anthony kissed her this time, it wasn't soft or desperate. It was a claim, a promise and a declaration of war against anyone who would try to come between them. Anthony's declaration changed everything overnight. Within 24 hours, Emily's simple one-bedroom apartment was replaced with a suite in Anthony's penthouse, complete with round-the-clock security and bulletproof windows. The transition from waitress to the protected girlfriend of New York's most powerful don was jarring and intense. I know this is a lot, Anthony said as he showed Emily through her new living space, but I need to know you're safe. Emily looked around at the opulent surroundings, marble floors, designer furniture, artwork that probably cost more than she'd made in her entire life, and felt overwhelmed. It's beautiful, she said honestly. But Anthony, this isn't me. I don't know how to live like this. Anthony stopped walking and turned to face her. Then we'll figure it out together. But Emily, after what happened with Vincent, I can't take any chances. My enemies know about you now. They'll use you to get to me if they can. Over the following days, Emily learned what it meant to be loved by Anthony Marconi. He was protective to the point of obsession, having her followed by discreet security whenever she left the penthouse. But he was also incredibly attentive, learning her coffee preferences, filling the kitchen with ingredients for her favorite recipes, and ensuring she had everything she could possibly want. The challenge came when Emily insisted on continuing to work at Bella Notte. "Absolutely not," Anthony said when she brought it up. "It's too dangerous." "I'm not going to hide in this penthouse for the rest of my life," Emily replied firmly. "I love my job, Anthony. It's part of who I am." Their first real fight lasted 3 days. Anthony argued from a position of logic and genuine fear for her safety. Emily argued from a position of independence and refusing to let danger dictate her life. In the end, they reached a compromise. Emily could continue working, but only with extensive security measures in place. 2 weeks after moving in with Anthony, Emily was getting ready for work when she noticed something was wrong. Anthony was pacing the bedroom, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "What's wrong?" Emily asked. Anthony sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her down beside him. "Vincent's made his move. He's challenging my authority publicly, trying to turn the other families against me." "What does that mean?" "It means we're going to war," Anthony said simply. "And Emily, once this starts, it won't stop until either Vincent is dead or I am." Emily felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "There has to be another way." "There isn't. Vincent crossed a line when he took you. Now it's about respect, honor, and survival." That evening at Bella Notte, Emily tried to maintain normalcy, but she could feel the tension in the air. Anthony's security team was larger than usual, and she noticed several men she didn't recognize seated at strategic points throughout the restaurant. Anthony arrived at his usual time, but Emily could see the strain in his face. The weight of leadership, of making decisions that would determine whether people lived or died, was taking its toll. "How are the other families responding?" Emily asked quietly as she brought him his wine. Anthony's eyes flicked around the restaurant before meeting hers. "Mixed. Some are staying neutral. Some are backing Vincent because they think he might win. A few are standing with me." "And if not enough stand with you?" Anthony was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll handle Vincent myself." Emily understood what he meant, and the thought terrified her. Anthony was willing to risk everything, his empire, his life, his future, rather than let Vincent's challenge go unanswered. The attack came 2 nights later. Emily was sleeping in Anthony's arms when the sound of gunfire shattered the night. Anthony was on his feet instantly, pulling Emily behind the bed's heavy wooden frame. "Stay down," he ordered, reaching for the gun he kept in the nightstand. The penthouse's security systems screamed warnings as Anthony spoke rapidly into his phone, coordinating the defense of their home. Emily pressed herself against the floor, listening to the sounds of battle raging outside their bedroom. "Anthony," she whispered, "what's happening?" "Vincent's making his final move," Anthony replied grimly. "He's trying to end this tonight." The fighting lasted 20 minutes, the longest 20 minutes of Emily's life. When it finally stopped, Anthony's security chief appeared in the doorway. "Sir," he said, "the building is secure. Vincent's men have been neutralized." "Vincent? Escaped. But sir," the man hesitated. "He left a message." Anthony's jaw tightened. "What message?" "He says if you don't meet him tomorrow night to settle this, he'll start targeting everyone you care about, starting with Miss Rodriguez." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Anthony's arms came around her immediately, but she could feel the tension in his body. "Where does he want to meet?" Anthony asked. "The old Torrino warehouse, midnight. He says come alone or he starts a war that will destroy both families." After his security chief left, Anthony held Emily close, but she could feel him pulling away emotionally, already planning for the confrontation. "You're going to meet him," Emily said. It wasn't a question. "I have to." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." Anthony's voice was final. "Anthony, I won't let you face this alone." "Emily, this isn't a discussion. Vincent wants me dead. I won't give him the chance to hurt you too." Emily pulled back to look at him. "And I won't lose you because you think you have to protect me from everything." Anthony cupped her face in his hands. "What we have, Emily, It's the first real thing I've ever had in my life. The first thing that's mine because I choose it, not because it was expected or required. I won't let Vincent take that away from me. Then don't go alone. I have to. This ends between Vincent and me. No one else gets hurt because of our war. Emily realized that Anthony had already made his decision. He was going to face Vincent alone, even if it meant dying to protect everyone else. I love you, Emily said, the words coming from the deepest part of her heart. Anthony's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had said it directly. I love you too, he replied. That's why I have to do this. Emily understood then that loving Anthony Marconi meant accepting that he would always choose sacrifice over safety, honor over self-preservation. It was part of what made him the man she loved, and it was going to break her heart. The next evening, Anthony prepared for his confrontation with Vincent with the same methodical care he brought to everything. He dressed in his finest suit, checked his weapons, and gave his lieutenants detailed instructions for every possible outcome. If something happens to me, he told Emily as he prepared to leave, Marcus will take care of you. You'll be safe, provided for. I don't want to be safe and provided for, Emily said fiercely. I want you to come back to me. Anthony kissed her with desperate intensity. I intend to. As Emily watched Anthony leave for what might be the last time, she made a decision that would either save them both or destroy everything. She was going to follow him. Emily waited 10 minutes after Anthony left, then called the one person she knew would help her. Marcus, she said when Anthony's lieutenant answered his phone, I need you to take me to the warehouse. Ma'am, Mr. Marconi specifically ordered— I know what he ordered, Emily interrupted. But Marcus, what if Vincent doesn't intend to fight fair? What if this is a trap? There was a pause. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Anthony is walking into this alone because he loves me. And I'm thinking that sometimes love means breaking the rules to protect the people you care about. Another pause. The car will be ready in 5 minutes. As Emily raced through the night toward what might be the end of everything, she reflected on how much her life had changed. 3 months ago, she had been a simple waitress with simple dreams. Now she was racing toward a confrontation between two of the most dangerous men in New York, willing to risk everything to save the man she loved. When they arrived at the warehouse district, Emily could see lights in the old Torrino building. Marcus parked where they could observe without being seen. There, Marcus pointed to several figures moving around the building's perimeter. Vincent brought backup. So it is a trap. Looks like it. Mr. Marconi's walking into an ambush. Emily felt steel settle in her spine. Then we're going to even the odds. As Emily prepared to enter the most dangerous situation of her life, she realized that Vincent had been wrong about one thing. Anthony hadn't made her a weakness. Loving him had made her strong enough to fight for what mattered most. The warehouse showdown would either be their salvation or their destruction, but Emily was determined that whatever happened, they would face it together. 1 year later, Emily stood in the kitchen of Bella Notte, now her own restaurant after Anthony had quietly purchased it and given it to her as a birthday gift. She wore a simple white apron over her favorite black dress, her engagement ring catching the light as she put the finishing touches on the evening's special menu. Through the pass-through window, she could see Anthony at what had once been his corner table, now permanently reserved with a small brass plaque reading, "The Marconi Table." He was reviewing contracts with Marcus, but Emily caught him glancing toward the kitchen every few minutes, that subtle smile playing at the corners of his mouth that still made her heart skip. The confrontation with Vincent had ended differently than anyone expected. When Emily arrived at the warehouse with Marcus and backup, they discovered that Vincent's trap was more elaborate than anyone realized. He had planned not just to kill Anthony, but to eliminate several other family heads in one night, consolidating power through violence and betrayal. But Emily's arrival had changed everything. Her refusal to let Anthony face danger alone, combined with the evidence Marcus had gathered about Vincent's broader conspiracy, had united the other families against Vincent. The man who had tried to use love as a weakness had ultimately been destroyed by the strength that love provided. Now Vincent was serving a life sentence in federal prison, betrayed by his own associates who chose Anthony's proven leadership over Vincent's reckless ambition. Chef Rodriguez called Sophia Emily's sous chef. The Barolo selection Anthony requested for tonight is ready. Emily smiled at the title. After the warehouse incident, Anthony had insisted on sending Emily to culinary school in Italy, partly to help her achieve her dreams, and partly because he wanted her to understand his heritage as deeply as possible. She had returned fluent in Italian and armed with techniques that had transformed Bella Notte into one of New York's most celebrated restaurants. "Perfect," Emily said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Is everything ready for tonight?" Tonight was special. Anthony had reserved the entire restaurant for what he claimed was a small family gathering. Emily suspected it was something more significant, but Anthony had been mysteriously secretive about the details. As the evening light faded outside, Emily watched the restaurant fill with familiar faces. Anthony's cousin Marco with his wife and children, the other family heads who had become unexpected allies, even some of Emily's own family, her parents, who had initially been terrified by Anthony's reputation, but had been won over by his genuine love for their daughter and his insistence on treating them with the utmost respect. "Emily," Anthony appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking devastating in a navy suit that emphasized his grey eyes. "Could I steal you away for a moment?" Emily glanced around the busy kitchen. "We're in the middle of service. Sophia can handle it," Anthony said, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant he wasn't really asking. Emily followed Anthony through the restaurant, noting that their guests seemed unusually focused on their conversations, carefully not watching as Anthony led her toward the private dining room in the back. The room had been transformed. Hundreds of white roses filled every available surface, and candles provided the only lighting. In the center of it all was a small table set for two, with the bottle of wine from their very first evening together. "Anthony," Emily breathed, "what is all this?" Anthony led her to the center of the room, then surprised her by dropping to one knee. Emily's hands flew to cover her mouth as he pulled out a small velvet box. "Emily Rodriguez," Anthony said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "A year ago you walked into my life and taught me something I never thought I would learn." "What's that?" Emily whispered. "You taught me that the greatest strength comes not from power or control, but from having something worth protecting, someone worth being better for." Anthony opened the box, revealing a stunning vintage ring with a center diamond surrounded by smaller stones. "You taught me that love isn't a weakness. It's the only thing that makes any of this worth it." Emily felt tears sliding down her cheeks as Anthony continued. "I know my world is complicated and sometimes dangerous. I know that loving me means accepting things that most people never have to think about. But Emily, you've never asked me to be anyone other than who I am. You've just made me want to be the best version of that man." Anthony took her left hand gently. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, supporting your dreams, and proving every day that you made the right choice when you decided to trust a man like me?" Through her tears, Emily looked down at this powerful, dangerous, incredibly tender man who was offering her his entire heart. She thought about the scared waitress she had been a year ago and the confident woman she had become through his love and support. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, Anthony, I'll marry you." As Anthony slipped the ring onto her finger, Emily realized that Vincent had been right about one thing. She had taught Anthony the meaning of fear, but it wasn't the fear of losing control or showing weakness. It was the fear of losing something so precious, so irreplaceable, that life without it would be meaningless. And paradoxically, that fear had made them both braver than they had ever been alone. Anthony rose and pulled Emily into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and promise of their future together. Outside the private dining room, Emily could hear the sounds of their family and friends celebrating, but in this moment, there was only the two of them and the incredible journey that had brought them together. "I love you, Mrs. Marconi-to-be," Anthony murmured against her lips. "I love you too," Emily replied. "And Anthony, thank you for teaching me that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is the right thing." As Emily looked into the eyes of the man who had turned her world upside down in the most beautiful way possible, she knew that their love story was just beginning. They had faced down threats, overcome obstacles, and chosen each other, despite every reason why they shouldn't work. Now they had forever to prove that love really could conquer all, even in the dangerous, complicated world of Anthony Marconi. The waitress who had once served him wine had become his equal partner, his strongest ally, and the love of his life. And the man who had never believed in love had discovered that it was worth every risk, every danger, and every sacrifice. Their story had taught them both that the greatest fear and the greatest courage comes from having something truly worth fighting for. This story has reached its beautiful conclusion. If it touched your heart and made you believe in the power of transformative love, please hit that like button and share it with someone who loves intense romance stories. Your support helps us bring you more captivating tales of love, danger, and redemption. New stories are coming soon. Until next time, keep believing in love that changes everything.